All right. Good morning, people. Welcome to this talk. It's a good way to start mornings, right? With nightmares. Just a technical check of hands working. Java developers here? People who've seen Java? Okay, good. Your hands are working, so that's very good. Use those hands. I don't want this to be, I usually do this kind of thing as a sort of kind of interaction thing. So I want you to comment and ask and things and stuff like that. You can do it at the end. You can write things on Slido. Go to Slido, put in GeeCON, hashtag GeeCON, write your stuff there. If you have any comments, shout out. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. It's okay. Shout out. Raise your hand. I'll repeat your question, your comment, or anything like that. So, let's talk a little bit about nightmares, or the opposite of that, the good things. So my name is Rustam. I live and work in Oslo, Norway. I work as a consultant. I do a lot of work for different customers, different projects, different kind of things. And this is a set of partially my own experiences or things that kind of indirect experience as well. I'm a Java champion. I'm a Google developer expert as well, so for cloud. So I do work mostly with Java and cloud and architecture and that kind of things. And I want to talk a little bit about this thing called DORA as well. So at some point, I'll explain what that is. If you haven't heard of it, just wait for a few more seconds. So first of all, I want to start with this this thing of a typical story, right? If you've seen a good movie, good book, maybe a bad movie, I don't know. It's still the same kind of story, right? You have a hero, you have some kind of challenge, something bad happens, something has to be solved, and then you have a kind of happy ending at the end, like, usually. There are some sad movies, but don't think about those. Hero, challenge, happy ending. So, the happy ending obviously is the unicorns and rainbows and that kind of stuff, right? The challenge, well, there's usually something scary, like this. This has been me procrastinating at some point, so I ended up drawing those. Anyone wants to guess who the hero is in our setting? Developer nightmares, developer happy days kind of thing. The customer, somebody. Well, kind of. It's even more obvious. Well, it's you. So, you are a part, well, customer obviously is, but usually customer is on the other side as well. So, you need to balance, but it's actually you doing all the good job and all the hard job and to make these things happen. And like I said, this is an experience, a list of experiences that I've had and, through the time of me working for quite some time as an architect, as a kind of consultant, advisor, all this kind of things. So, this is me analyzing large systems, large Java systems. We're talking 450, 500,000 lines of code-ish kind of systems, so big ones. Old systems. This is not a microservice. I hope you get that, right? There is nothing micro about 500,000 lines of code, but you get the point. It can be microservices, but that's a different story. So what is the challenge? The challenge usually is, if any of you have worked on any project longer than a day, a week, a month, or something like that, usually it's that. So this is a very old tweet, but it really holds well. You are on a legacy project. It doesn't even have to be on a legacy code base. It can be like a couple of years old code base, right? You try to learn to understand what it is. Okay, let's look for tests. Are there tests? Well, there's no tests. Okay, cool. You read the specs. Can I read the specs? Is there like somewhere on Wiki, Confluence, whatever, SharePoint? Well, there is no spec. And then you write something and everything implodes. Familiar? Anyone? Yeah, it's almost the same amount of people I asked who've heard about Java, so that's good. Then this happens. When you try to fix this, right, you just realize, okay, this is a bad thing, let's fix it. And then project managers, customers, and all the other ones come in and say, nah, you have this backlog of new features to do. Why are you supposed to be wasting time on things that nobody's going to see, like test coverage? Who cares about that? You know. And, well, it's also a very old tweet. That is from, 2020, so it's actually a 4-year-old thing. Still holds. Right? But let's do a little bit of kind of a fun thing first. And I want to start with a little bit of, call it, a trip back in time. And the whole idea is that everything is relative. So what I'm going to tell you now, it's a little bit nostalgic kind of thing we're going to start the morning with, but the whole point is everything is relative. So when you talk about bad things versus good things, it's really, really different. Because if you go back in time, you get into your time machine, go back to 90s, and you actually work and think of a regular, normal day for a developer in 90s, it would be a nightmare for you. Back then, it was rainbows and unicorns. Because things like, any idea why I have that picture? Because we were doing development in waterfalls. We were not doing any agile, all this kind of things. We were doing waterfalls. At some point, we started with something called RUP, R-U-P, and all these kind of things. And it was like, we weren't even close to agile. Imagine doing waterfalls now. Some of you might, but that's a different story, right? As a developer in the 90s, what I'm going to show now, it's probably going to be late 90s because we're talking about Java. So we would actually write code in notepads, Emacs, and Vims. There was no IntelliJ or Eclipse or even NetBeans and stuff like that, right? Imagine doing it now. Writing your code in a notepad, I'm talking about Windows Notepad. Tempting? Nah. Autocompletion? Color coding, compiling, all this kind of stuff? All right, well, now it's scary. Back then it was nice. Anyone remembers this one? Not the new one, not the one that actually still exists, but the old one. Good, I saw 3 hands. So that thing was a really fun thing. You could just check out each file one by one, and you had to check it out and back in before everyone could use it. Anybody else? Yeah, that wasn't very fun. Actually, that thing, it sounds scary now, right? That thing was launched mid-90s. That's 94, right? CVS, which is another thing that most of people probably suppressed or not remembering or actually haven't seen even. There was CVS, then was Mercurial, after that came Git at some point and all this stuff, right? That thing came in 1990. Back then it was bleeding edge. CVS, anyone? Okay, more hands, good. I'm happy for you that less people experienced source safe. It's good. Now it looks, would you use it now? Probably not. Oh, compiling things. I was working on a project in early 2000s still that would do that. ClassPass in bat files, so we would just have a actual spaghetti code of bat files, because in bat you can actually have go-tos. So you can actually do proper spaghetti, like full scale, like, you know, as it's supposed to be made in Italy and stuff. Well, I don't know if that kind of spaghetti is made in Italy, but you get the point, right? Class files. Imagine debugging that thing. You have like 10, 20 bat files pointing at each other. Something goes wrong. Hey. Then we would do we would do compiling of Java and stuff. When you've built your, class files, everything works. You would actually do Java from the command line with another bat file. Yeah, no, doesn't work now like this. Issue tracking. Ooh, that was fun. So this was actually a colleague of mine. I asked him, and I was like, hey, give me something really, really scary from 90s. And he was like, yeah, back then we wouldn't do, Bugzillas and Jiras and all the other things that would use the issue tracking for. We would use MS Access. Anyone remembers MS Access? Good. For the rest of you, it was a part of Office package, and it was a kind of nice-ish database. The problem was that it was one user database. It was for your desktop, for your machine. But, I mean, we developers were creative people, right? Do you know how we solved that problem? Any guesses? Because it would just store in one database file, right? And it would be one database file per person. And that sucks. That doesn't work for issue tracking. Remote desktop, yeah, no, you have to think worse. Oh, yeah, you're getting close. So we put that on a shared network drive in a folder, right? What can possibly go right? 5 people opening a single user database file, editing it, clicking on save, and then it's like last person wins, or then you just get corrupt file and you just have to start all over again. Fun? Hey, we used to do that. So now all this thing is gone, right? And now it's rainbows and unicorns. You don't have any problems anymore, right? All that is gone, right? I don't see anyone jumping out of their seats and saying, hey! No. Okay, well, actually it's not. And that is a little bit of a problem. And let's talk a little bit about why. So, rainbows and unicorns. And the happy ever after kind of things, right? Based on research, what actually makes you as a developer happy? There is actually, people have been doing research. People have been looking into this. And so there is now we're getting back to Dora. So there is a company that was a separate company, then it got acquired by Google. Now it's a part of Google Cloud. It's called Dora. So DevOps, yeah, I'll get back. I'll get back to what it means in a second. It's just a little brain thingy that needs to work. If you remember it, please feel free to shout out. Yeah, anyway. The whole idea is, it's all about, that's kind of the main takeaway from that. There is a bigger picture in the background. I'll unblur it in a second. But the whole idea is that it is 4 things that we need to think about and that makes us happy as developers. And then we have things like throughput of our code and stability of our code. So if you go, the upper 2 are about throughput, so, changed a lead time. So from the moment you as a developer start writing your code till it ends up in production, that's your change lead time. The deployment frequency is also something about that, because how often do you actually get to deploy your stuff? And it's a very important thing, because you need to measure both, because change lead time, if you increase your change, so if you increase your deployment frequency, obviously the change lead time will go down as well. But if you don't do things right, you might increase your next thing, change fail rate. Because if your code is a little bit buggy, every time you deploy, you get more errors. And more errors you get, the change fail rate will increase. And then what you normally would end up doing is like, okay, well, let's just deploy less often. But that's not how it works, right? You're not supposed to do that. You're actually supposed to make your code a little bit better and a little bit less problematic and a little bit less bug prone. Then there is another thing when it comes to stability. It's okay to break things, but it's as long as you're able to restore it back to normal as soon as possible, as fast as possible. So there is this thing about time to restore service as well. So throughput, change lead time, deployment frequency, and stability like change fail rate, time to restore service, and all this kind of things. And all of that is documented on the website that you see up there, but we'll talk more about that, and I will show you, as I promised, the whole picture. So you see there is on the left side, there is a bunch of things that you've seen a lot before. People talked about a lot about things like code maintainability, continuous everything, integration, deployment, all those things. Deployment automation, test automation, test data management, all this kind of thing, version control, all those things that we've talked a lot about. And they actually do contribute to happier developers. But also, there's things like shift to left to security, there's continuous delivery. So there are like a bigger chunks, bigger grouping of things that do contribute that. And at the end, what you get on the other end of that pipeline is actually operational performance as a company, right? So it's commercial and non-commercial things. So your company or whoever you work for, your customer or whatever, they start to thrive and be happy. And also there is something called well-being of us as a developers doing stuff, right? So we have less pains in doing development. It's less toil, less burnout, less rework, and all this kind of things. All right? So that continues everything kind of thing, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. And usually people call it many things, right? We used to call it continuous something, something, something. After a while we built on top of that and we said, hey, we have this cloud native stuff and we need to think as a DevOps, and probably DevOps is one of the most recently misunderstood or misused concepts. People call themselves as a DevOps people. It's like, well, it's a culture. It's not a position. And the craziest thing I've seen is a full stack DevOps person with 24/7 on call. Can you just process all that and imagine? That's one whole IT department in one person. So we want you to be doing front end, back end, full DevOps, whatever that is, and be on call 24/7, one person. But, when you do all that, when you use all those magic words, you get unicorns and rainbows, right? What do we mean by actually cloud native? And cloud native, and just to prove you the point, it's a lot of the same things that we're talking about. So cloud native foundation, this is a wall of text that I'm showing you. You're not supposed to do that because I already probably lost most of you trying to parse that text. Stop doing that. I'll help you. Don't worry. You'll get to read that text with a shorter attention span needed. See? Helped you. See? Helped you some more. So now you have the main words and you have kind of the main ideas of that. What do you want to do? How you want to do it? And why you want to do it? Why on earth would you be doing that? Do you recognize a lot of those words that you've seen in the DORA research? So, the problem is, and that's all fine, right? But the problem is that all this, like continuous something, cloud native, all those things, are being sold to you as one big rocket ship that will bring you from Earth to, planets out there, and it will help you and solve all the problems if you do all of that at the same time. The problem is that you can't, and you shouldn't. What you should be doing is trying to change small things at a time. So one little thing at a time that you change, and then your world becomes a tiny little bit better, and then you do another one, and another one, and another one, so you actually don't build the whole ship and take flight to another planet. You actually build it piece by piece and actually kind of fly that little piece to some other planet. That doesn't make sense, I know, but you get the point. So there is one problem with that as well. Because now we're, okay, well, we're just going to improve things tiny little bit. We explain that to our project managers and project leads and whoever is paying for all this, and everything is going to be peachy. It doesn't really work like that because people start measuring things. And when people start measuring things, this happens. Because you get a number, I was like, oh yeah, now we're going to have 19 is a bit too low, 79.25% test coverage at least. And people go crazy with tests. They write really, really bad tests, and just to hit that target. Does that really help? It doesn't. So that is usually the thing I say to to the managers and the project lead side. And I was like, don't start measuring things on a kind of religious basis, because it's a bad idea. People will start self-optimizing, and it will be bad. DevOps research and assessment, by the way, that's what DORA stands for. It took some time to background processing to get that. It's a bit early in the morning. So let's talk. Now we talked about the nightmares and the trips back in time and all these kind of things. But what actually makes a paradise, or whatever the opposite of the nightmare is, happy place? Yeah, well, there are usually moving parts, and they look like this, right? You have your code. Things connected to your code, like things of architecture, the tools you use to develop things, third-party libraries and all that stuff. You have general tooling that does all the CI/CD and all these kind of things. And you have a docs and collaboration part. So documentation, talking to each other, all that things. Let's go a little bit quick through that as well. And the idea is, if you manage to treat all those things, maybe one thing at a time, but still attend to all those things, it will be, sunny weather and palm trees and beach umbrellas, or whatever you'd like to call a paradise. Okay, let's talk a bit about development. So what I usually do is, when I do software reviews, when I'm being hired to go through projects or help people to go and improve their development routines. And now actually that thing is also called DevX, developer experience. And there are a bunch of DevX tools, and there is support for that and all those kind of things. So when I usually go there and try to see what hurts and what is kind of painful for developers, I look at things. I start looking at the code. And I look at the code quality, and usually I just ask them, like, hey, do you have code standards? Most of the times people would be saying, yeah. Do you have code standards in your project? Good. So what I usually ask that makes them a little bit more nervous is, do you follow that? Thank you. I see what was that? 3 hands? 2 hands? 2.5? Yeah. So that's the problem, People will be like, you come in, they're a bit scared of you because you're doing review, you're external, you're kind of scary consultant. I was like, hey, do you have a code standard? It's like, yes, I know, I can answer this. Yes, we do. Like, do you follow that? Yeah, that guy over there, he has it on his computer, and I have my own version on mine, and, she has it over there, and, well, yeah. That kind of sucks a little bit, right? And then there are things that doesn't really mean to be scary, and not anymore. It used to be much worse back in the days, where you would actually... I actually been on a project which broke the build many times just because of the encoding. Because, you have things like that. That's Norwegian words with all the funny letters. So that's actually a fun fact. That's the only 3 words that you can find in Norwegian that has all the 3 extra letters that we have. And that is not Norwegian, but still different kind of extra letters. All that can theoretically break your code. Nowadays it doesn't, but still. This definitely not going to break your code, but it usually gives me a smell, like a code smell, because most likely you don't have this kind of unified set of tools to do stuff. And it will tell me that, I've seen Java files being MIME typed as HTML files. probably not a big problem, but it usually tells me that probably some kind of weird tool has been used that updated that MIME time to something, like Notepad or something. Again, not a big problem, but it's going to mess up your code quality, code standards, indentations, all the things that will make your code look weird. The diff on your version control will be looking different because now instead of changing one line, you've changed like 300 lines of code because everything got replaced with a different kind of indentations or something. And it, nightmare goes on and on and on and on. I'm not saying do follow that crazy, but it usually gives me a little bit of an idea of what it is. Another thing I ask people if they do code reviews, if they actually do pull requests and code reviews and stuff, and the craziest I've seen and I've heard, it would be like, nah, we don't do that. We worked a lot together. Like, we worked for 15 years, we finished each other's sentences, so no. And then you would be like, yeah, but it's not about that. It's not about, like, checking schoolwork if you've done your work or dog ate your code or something. But it's actually about trying to explain it to somebody, trying to solve a problem, trying to vet your problem solving kind of thing, and just make sure that you've thought about all the other possibilities and stuff, right? So development tools, usually what I try to suggest or ask or see if people have thought about, it will be different levels. Believe me, there are different levels. There are people that are not there at all, people that are there fully, and there's a bunch of everything in the middle. For development tools, well, do you have integrated code versioning thing? Can you just do it from your IDE or your command line or something? Make it easy. When you do that, how you do that? Do you have a standards for committing stuff? Do you do like a issue first and then description, or you just say fixed stuff and say and commit? All this and everything in between again. Another thing that I usually ask people to think about, and just kind of food for thought for all of you sitting here, how do you do branching? Because, branching is not just about like, dev branch and production branch and done. How do you do feature branches? How would you handle, let's say, if you have one version in production, one version in development, one version in kind of early stage of development, and you need to fix a bug fix and issue like a critical bug fix in production, and then you need to apply all those bug fixes to all the other branches. It already got complicated, right? You have 3 different versions of the same code base, and you need to apply it to all of them. How do you do that? Do you start with production? Do you kind of mirror them? How do you handle conflicts? A lot of things, right? There is not a single silver bullet for that, but there is just food for thought. Think about that. Make an active choice. Complexity testing, yeah, there are tools and stuff to actually do that, but usually those would be integrated in your IDEs. So make sure that you use something for that, to make sure that you check your code complexity. If you have I've seen the craziest I've seen on large expert systems and legacy code, it would be like a huge amount of ifs and ifs going in and then out. And then you have else's and else ifs and all that in between. And then you shake it well, you give it like a 10-year of all kind of legacy and tech depth, grow on top of that, and then you have a fantastic thing to debug. Static code analysis, that's a little bit in the same ballpark as the complexity testing and all this kind of things. There's a bunch of tools for that, but you need something that will do that job for you as well. Plugins as well, so use the plugins and all this. The thing I really want to talk about, and people think that people very often forget and very, very often mess up with respect to a lot of things, is third-party libraries. How many of you use third-party libraries in your code? I expect all hands up, pretty much, right? Good. Do you have a full control over all known issues and vulnerabilities for all the third-party libraries that you have? People raising their hands probably work in fintech, financial something, or military something. I don't know what, like where they actually do security. Yeah, that too. And security companies as well, probably, hopefully. Another thing. How many of you usually, and that's where things get like even less. So now it was a lot of hands, right? Third-party libraries. For a list of all the libraries that you use, there was what, 5, 6, 7 hands or something in the huge room. How many of you actually have control over licenses as well? Yeah, it's pretty much the same set of hands. Usually it's the same or less. It's never bigger. And the fun part, how many of you actually know if the libraries are the latest version, if they're maintained at all, and if they're compatible with each other? Okay, I see 2 hands, 3, 4. Yeah, okay, it's pretty much the same. The same gang here. Cool. I love you people. The rest of you, do what those people do. Because you need to know. There are like a bunch of things, right? It's not about licensing. If we go tiny little bit back, it's not about just licensing if you're going to pay money or not. It's more about what your code might get off a permission kind of thing, right? Maybe you'll just go GPL. If you use a GPL library, your code automatically becomes GPL. Or, things like that. You really need to be aware of that. And also when we're talking about maintainability and stuff, the craziest thing I've seen, it's not really crazy, but the thing is, I've seen a bunch of libraries that I was starting looking up. I was like, I haven't heard about this thing for a while. And then I look it up, and so it was part of Apache, and it was Apache Foundation, and it was in Apache Attic. Anyone knows what Apache Attic is? It's exactly what Attic is in a normal house. That's where you put things to die. So when projects are not being maintained, they move them to Apache Attic, and it just stays there forever, just like frozen. Do you think things in Apache Attic will get security patches? Fixes, all these kind of things? Probably not. So, a little bit scary. Deployment process, well, automate all of that. That's the short version. That's all I'm going to say. Because if you're doing ClickOps, like most of projects I've seen, big projects, big companies, large things, all of them have done ClickOps. And okay, how is your Kubernetes cluster set up? Well, we just followed the wizard, just click next, next, next. And then it was something. We haven't touched it for the last 10 years because it worked, or whatever, 5 years, whatever. And it's not updated. It's not updated with the newest versions and things like that. But hey, it works, right? If you would actually have it automated, it would be a script. You can actually tear it down and rebuild it. How would you do that? If your data center or anything has an outage, what will happen? Well, will you be able to rebuild it like this? Probably not if it's manual. Because somebody forgot some kind of setting sometime in the back in time that has been done, and it's not there anymore, or you forgot to tick off a little box, and then everything grinds to a halt. A lot of errors and bad things I see people do is that they have different routines to deploying to different environments. You shouldn't do that. Try to do it as similar as possible, because if you do manual deployment to dev and maybe test and stuff like that, by the time you get to staging or production and automate that, if you have automation, you will find errors then. You want to find your errors earlier, right? Yeah, tools, I'm not going to talk much about that. There are a bunch of tools. Use those. You don't have to write everything from scratch. It's really fun. It's not that fun to maintain. Somebody else can maintain those kind of things for you. I love this picture, especially when you think of architecture. This is, you see what that is? That's a huge monolith going right into the cloud. Put into a container. You shove a tiny little You open a tiny little container, you shove a huge elephant into it, you just barely manage to close the door, you deploy it to the cloud. Well, we're cloud native. Don't do that. You actually need to do your architecture. You actually need to rethink your architecture. You need to do your architecture to actually be able to support, even if you do monoliths and stuff, that's fine. But are you able to support things like continuous deploy? Can you actually deploy continuously, or you need to take down everything, redeploy new versions, pray to all the deploy gods, and then just wait for a half an hour for everything to start and just do it again? Yeah, I mean, if you have that, you're not going to deploy several times a day, would you? Probably not. Like 3-4 times a year, maybe? Nah, you don't want to do that. So yeah, application architecture, integration architecture, how things are talking to each other as well. And I'm not talking just about direct calls and stuff, but maybe you don't need to have a huge service bus or a pub sub or something in between. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't need it for everything. I've seen people using something like a queue-based thing, like a pub sub or something, using it religiously for everything. Tiny little nano services talking to each other through a pub sub. Do you really need that? Do you really need all that complexity? Maybe not. Maybe you do. If you do, you probably have a good reason. That's fine. If you don't, maybe rewrite that. Code package structure, even if you do a monolith, you still have to structure your code. You don't have to have like 15 util dot something, dot misc, dot util, dot misc, dot stuff, I don't know what that is anymore, classes and packages, and all classes and everything from everywhere pointing to that, whatever I said name of the util package class thingy was. You need to think about that. Tools, well, all your environments, so all the kind of the sandboxes and playgrounds and all these kind of things that you use, think about that. Do you use same routines to deploy? We talked about that. For all the environments, are your environments similar? I worked on a project where we ended up taking down production while doing performance testing on test environments. You know how? They actually had, I'll tell the story in a second. I'll leave you a little bit on a cliffhanger. You get to think about that a little bit, but I'll get to that in a very, very, very few seconds. So, are your environments similar, first of all? Because this is usually where you find bottlenecks for performance, and you try to fix them in production, in development. By the time you deploy to production, no changes are visible because you use different kind of specs on your servers, the bottlenecks were a totally different place, you optimize something else that's not a problem in production anymore. So you need to do some observability, you need to actually try to match your environments as well. Are those shared environments, Are those environments rebuildable with a script? All of them. Terraform, Pulumi, whatever code as infrastructure as code and all those things. This is the thing I was talking about. Are you actually using the same physical environment? This is how we took down the production. Because it was actually two different environments. It was a production environment, it was test environments. The only problem was that they both were using the same SAN, disks. So when you do performance testing on the test environment, it overloads the disks. The whole SAN stops responding. Production gets a little bit sad and goes down. So, yeah, probably not a good idea. Monitoring, well, you really need to monitor all of your environments. Again, if you monitor only your production and all the other environments, you really will not be able to see those errors coming up much, much, much earlier in the pipeline of your code. If you do that, well, you'll see it earlier, right? I love this picture as well. It's all about using the right tool for the right thing. If only thing that you have is a hammer, well, you're gonna, use everything as a nail. But you can actually, do that. Don't do that. But still, use the right environments for things. Use the IDE for what it's worth. Use all the plugins and all these things, right? Use the integrations with static code analysis, test tools, and all these kind of things. Add checks at commits, because sometimes people will like, nah, I don't feel like adding issue number for my commit, because it was just a little thing. I just didn't create an issue because it wasn't a big thing. And then that little thing that you've checked a spelling error, fixed a spelling error on a Friday evening takes down the whole production, and then you kind of a bit in a problem because nobody knew what actually happened because there is no paper trail of that thing. Well, maybe for you it's good when you took down an environment on a Friday evening that there is no paper trail, but like in general, it's probably not a good idea, probably. So maybe you want to enforce checks and at commits, saying, hey, our commits always should start with 2 or 3 letters, 40 letters, whatever, and for whatever, like 4 or 5 digits of code, which will point to a issue in our issue tracking thing, and then we add a meaningful comment what it is. Automate tests, obviously. This is fun. I want to talk a little bit. I want to spend a few last minutes about the thing that we kind of tend to ignore the most. Sounds familiar? Docs? Who loves to write documentation? Nice. Okay, I see some correlation. It was the same people that were having all their third-party libraries in check and all these kind of things. Again, love you people. The rest of you, learn, look and learn, live and learn. So there are a bunch of tools for collaboration, right? There are like wikis and chats and Slacks and whatever. Whatever that thing is, by the way, things like a chat, what Slack is, that's not your documentation place. That's the chat place. That's collaboration. You don't put stuff that's supposed to live for long into a thread in somewhere in Slack, especially if you're using free version that will get blocked after 10,000 messages. And it's like, well, it's somewhere. By the way, we need to pay to get that information back, but the password to the server is there. You don't do that. You actually put that somewhere. And I was on a project, working on a project where I asked them all these difficult questions, and they kind of were getting sweatier and sweatier and sweatier on the, on the other side of the table. And they would be like, okay, do you have collaboration tools? And they were like, yes, this answer we can answer. Yes, we do. And I was like, oh, cool, which one? And they were like, oh, we have 2. And then I was like, okay, this is bad. They were really proud of it. Think about it. 2 tools to update your documentation, to write your documentation in 2 different places. They had, I think it was like Confluence and SharePoint or something like that. If you have 2, which one do you update? Neither. Correct. That is the only correct answer. One of them or both, if you're saying that, I'm not going to believe you until I actually see that. Neither. And that is the problem. So pick one, stick to one. Even if you're doing something else that everybody else is using, that's fine. README files in your repository. Anything works. So this is, I want to talk a little bit about issue tracking. And this is my version of issue tracking. In retrospective, I realized that the thing I drew was actually bug containment system, not tracking system. But, it's something. They have air. They're breathing there. I'm not torturing little bugs, just saying. But it was the same project. And I asked them, after asking the collaboration tool, I was like, okay, issue tracking, what do you use? Oh, yeah, we have that too. Okay. I kind of knew that was something bad there, right? I was like, tell me more. Guess what they tell me? They were like, yeah, we do. It's like, okay, out with it. How many? 2. Why? Well, because customers has one and the consultants has another one. Oh, okay. Sure. You have a sync job between those, right? Yeah. You see that guy over there? What happens when a person has to manually sync 2 issues from 2 different systems with 2 different fields? What can possibly go right? And then I get like really frustrated and I come back to work, talk to a colleague of mine. I was like, oh my God, I'm on this project. They have like 2 issue tracking systems, 2 of this. And she was like, that's not the worst. I'm working in a project where we have 3 issue tracking systems. And guess what? 2 people, 2 different people doing the synchronizing between all those 3 systems. Can you imagine? Like, imagine working on a system like this, and imagine having that job. It's like 2 different levels of hell, probably. I mean, if you like that, thing's probably good for you, but not my cup of tea, probably, I guess. Right, so let's go back to the moving parts, right? We talked about, let's go back. We talked about all those things, and we talked a little bit, and the whole idea is you don't have to implement all of those at the same time, but one little thing at a time will make your things a little bit better. And this is all what it's about. It's about our happiness as developers, our customers' happiness, our company's well-being, and business and non-business values and things being fulfilled. But it's actually all about how fast you can deploy your code, how often you deploy that, how little or big the change fail rate is, and how long does it take for you to roll back if anything goes bad. And now it will be unicorns and rainbows and all that, right? Yeah, this is me. This is how you can find me on online. So I got tired of maintaining all the list of all the social media accounts. So I created that website that goes there, and you have a list of all the other ones that was supposed to take life of or kill the Twitter, X, whatever that thing is. But, all of them are there. It got really crowded on slides. I got bored. I fixed that. That's what happens when developers get bored. They create websites to the domains they own already. They've been hoarding for a long time. Let's see. Can I do this thing? Screen mirroring. Can I do that? Done. Display, mirror. So now you can actually see the questions. What about less technical things that contribute to developer happiness? Offices, quiet offices, less overtime, stability. Yes, definitely all that. They pretty much say that open offices is very bad. Now there is a bunch of research about that. Nobody talks about that or hears it. It doesn't seem we're going to go back to offices like separate cubicles. Not cubicles. We're not talking office space from the movie. If you haven't seen it, please do. Not that kind of cubicles, but actual offices. Probably we're not going there anytime soon, but maybe it's a good idea. At least something that dampens the noise. Home office kind of helped a little bit, so I don't know. But yes, and it's important to say the right balance, but also it's very easy to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to work from home now. It may be a good idea, but if you have an office, try to go and talk to other people and meet the other people, because you actually get a lot of ideas and stuff by interacting with people as well. So it is a balance, and you need to find a balance for yourself. You said about tools for collaboration and documentation. Do you have any strategies for making sure that documentation is there and up to date? My main and biggest strategy usually is to tell people to write as little as possible, but still enough. And think of me as a developer coming into a new project. I need to understand how it works. Just a little bit about that. If you're going to write 1,000 pages or 10,000 pages about that, nobody's going to read it. Do it short and kind of newbie friendly. Another aspect that needs to be there is I am the ops person. Thing got down. Where do I find errors? Where do I find logs? How do I actually make it back up again? And the third one is more about we're working on a project and we need to have a little bit of idea of documentation and all that. Where you put it, some of it probably should live with the code in a README file and have pointers to it from whatever wiki thing you're using. Some of it can actually live in a wiki. That's fine as well. some of the good practices in the talk also add friction to developers' life. How to set the right balance? Yeah, well, now I'm going to be a good consultant and say, well, it depends. Because it actually does depend. Because, this is fun. What do you think about AI for docs? Well, for the balance thing, it really depends, because sometimes some of us use bad excuses as, well, it's self-documenting code, or we're a self-organizing team, and we can do, basically meaning that we can do whatever the hell we want, and nobody can tell us anything. It's just an excuse. So just stop and think, what I'm saying now, is it just my excuse not to do things I don't really like, or it actually is a thing? Opinions may differ. You might throw things at me, but imagine somebody like even yourself 5 years later, coming back to the same code and just looking at it as like, what was that thing? How did I do that? So you might want to, it's maybe not always as self-documented as it is. Maybe it is for you because you have super eidetic memory and all that. Maybe it's not as good for your colleague or a new person coming in right from the university, right from a junior position kind of person as well. So AI for docs, well, I kind of have mixed feelings about that. It might be good to do some kind of idea to give you structure and things, but maybe not a good idea to do it just like generate me generic stuff about this class, or explain this class to me and I'm just going to copy paste that to Wiki. Maybe not a good idea, but because, first you use AI, it's a slippery slope, right? First you use AI to generate, then you use AI to read the documentation and give me a summary, and then use AI to fix the bugs, and then use AI to commit the code back to production. And then, well, you don't have any control at all, right? So you might want to do it, because AI is not going to take our jobs just yet, but we need to use it with moderation and this kind of things. Okay, I think the time is up. If you have any other questions, please feel free to come down and say hi to me. And with that, I'll say thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of the conference.